I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Minakaims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by Prize Picks and Game Time. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but today, Taylor, we have another film room episode of the podcast, and at this point, it's the quote heard around the world from Jerod Mayo, calling his team soft, calling him out. Bill Belichick's pissed about it. We'll get into all of it. Mayo said yesterday, as we know, we are a soft football team across the board. He has since walked that comment back a little bit, said that we're not a soft football team, but we're playing soft. And the point stands, really. And he said that, you talk about what makes a tough football team. It's being able to run the football. It's being able to stop the run. And it's being able to cover kicks. He said they did none of those on Sunday. And ironically, that's the same moniker as a Bill Belichick coach football team. Taylor shared some insight into a Matt Patricia. Was it a meeting room or something, Taylor?
It was a clinic, like a coaching clinic.
Okay, yeah, it was a Patricia clinic, and he had a slide up on the board that said, what makes tough football teams, and it's running the ball, stopping the run, and kickoff coverage. And as Mayo said, they did none of those on Sunday. So it made our jobs, I don't want to say easier, but it gave us a nice storyline to pair into the film room show to show you guys why the Patriots are playing soft football. So we broke down a little bit of the running game and how the Patriots aren't running the ball efficiently. We broke down the same thing of them stopping the run or not stopping the run. And we have a little nugget at the back end as well of Bryce Behringer's punt that turned into a punt return touchdown. So we're going to jump right into it, hit on all three, and we're going to start with the Patriots' lack of a running game on Sunday. And they come into this one, Taylor, 7 offensive lines in 7 consecutive weeks. And they also come into this one without Ramondre Stevenson fully healthy. He hadn't practiced in, I think, just about 2 weeks prior to that last Friday practice in London before they ended up making him available for the game. They didn't elevate any running backs behind him, Hasty and Gibson. They really just went with those 3, and they gave, Ramondre the lion's share of the carries, and it didn't go well. They ran for just 38 yards on 15 attempts, 2.5 yards a carry. Drake May and Stevenson were tied for the lead with 18 yards apiece. It didn't go well, and it's been the last 2 weeks without a healthy Stevenson where this thing has just kind of gone down the drain. They went from averaging just over 5 yards a carry through the first 5 weeks to 2.9 yards per carry the last 2 weeks. They have the fewest yards before contact per rush. They have the second lowest conversion percentage in the league. These are all courtesy of PFF. They have 4 explosive runs in the last 2 weeks. That is tied 5th fewest in the NFL, and their run stuff percentage is 30.3, and they're the only team, Taylor, you pointed this out, averaging negative yards before contact. So not
Since
good.
Since
week 5. Yeah, since week 5.
I'm sorry. It's past 2 weeks.
The last 2 weeks, which again, it's fine, but that's kind of the point of this thing is it's really, they were running the ball efficiently over the first 5 weeks. A couple games weren't great in total yards, and it wasn't the reason they won or lost. Really, couldn't have been the reason they won. They only won one of the games, but it was efficient, and now it's just kind of gone down the drain. So let's pull up the film and kind of explain why. There's a little bit more nuggets in there, but Jerod Mayo said it himself. It's something you got to watch on film, but it's also a mentality and an attitude.
Yeah, and Jerod Mayo said what we said last, or you weren't there, I know, but Zanis, he and I said last night, in that last week, it wasn't really that they were just getting killed in the ground game. And in most of the games, it's really been a bigger problem of you're giving up like 4 or 5 explosive runs a game, sometimes 6. Like, it's one thing, and I think they're one of the better teams in the league when it comes to consistency. Like, teams don't really run on them successfully throughout the game, but because these games are either blowouts against the Patriots or they're close games where no one is really so far apart that one part of the game is taken away, then you get to the point where, okay, they can still run the ball, and the more chances you get, the more likely the defense is to give up some big runs. Right. Against the Texans, it really was only like 4 or 5 plays where you're really like, if we get those back, and they've said this, if we get those back, it's a different story in the game. Like, those big runs really put them in a bad spot. It set up a lot of other things because C.J. Stroud didn't really have a great game.
Wait, Taylor, flip it. We're talking about the Patriots running the ball.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Oh my
It's okay. It's okay.
He talks so much Drake May that when
know.
it comes to actually talking about the run game, my brain gets scrambled. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. No, you're fine.
You for the run defense. You should have cut me off earlier. My stupid
I was funny. I was putting our rundown together, and all of a sudden I heard this other stuff. I was like, wait, that's not what we're talking about.
That's my bad. Well, we're talking about the run offense too. That wasn't very good either. So
Okay.
with the run offense, the bigger issue is like against Miami, they killed it, right? They didn't run a ton, but they ran very efficiently. Then last week we started to see, all right, there's issues, and even last night, I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Let me watch the film before I say the run game was down because I want to know, like, if it's just City So having trouble, that's one thing. You know, DeMontre Jacobs is the problem. Sure, the run game's down, but I'm not going to have them my stock down necessarily because you don't really expect those guys to be the ones putting the, run offense on their back. This week, though, the big target, and as you can see in the compilation, again, I can't believe I did.
That's all good.
But it was Michael Jordan, really, for the most part. And
we're a soft podcast, Taylor. We're a soft podcast. We can't get it right.
We're a soft podcast. The fundamentals are screwed in this podcast. But the big issue was Michael Jordan, and he didn't have a great week last week. I think for the most part, he really has exceeded expectation for the Patriots, especially in pass protection. But in the run game, he really did struggle. Now, his 26.6 PFF run blocking grade is what he's had since week 6. That is the lowest in the NFL among players with at least 50 offensive snaps. Clearly not very good. And then DeMontre Jacobs, he's the 8th lowest among tackles with 100 offensive snaps with a 50.8 run blocking grade. So hasn't really been great for the Patriots, really mostly reserves, although Michael Jordan's pretty much been a starter. But the reasons that they really had issues were, one, they tried a lot of outside zone, and it wasn't anything super sneaky like they went with their 11 personnel groupings. They ran to the open side or the side that didn't have a tight end. But it wasn't even the predictability, really. It was the execution, because there were times where Michael Jordan struggled to either get out in front of his blocker. Now, sometimes maybe you could have had a better assist from Ben Brown. There was one rep from Ben Brown where he did get pushed back, kind of threw things off, because as some of the coaches on Twitter have been awesome in reminding me, if you can't, as a running back, run on track with your center on outside zone, it really makes life difficult because that's really your North Star pretty much. So again, Michael Jordan on the outside zone concepts wasn't really able to get in front of his blockers or get to the second level. And then on some of the gap concepts where, like from shotgun, they tried to run counter, they tried to run power, some gap things with Michael Jordan pulling, he really doesn't get a ton of push when he actually makes impact. So what happens is he gets knocked back and the guys that are trying to run behind him end up running into a wall, and then things kind of collapse around them. Also, City So, I don't want to dog on the guy because this is the second time we've seen him this season, and it's really been in more of like a niche role last week. So he wasn't really great either. Like there was a time where it was a pin pull run. You can see it on the compilation where he tries to get outside and set the edge. He doesn't get any movement, and then the running back kind of runs into him. And again, everything kind of collapses around them. But Ben Brown, for the most part, especially downhill, I thought he was solid. I thought at times Mike and Wendy and City So, I don't really have a ton of their duo runs. There was only a couple that really stood out negatively. They didn't get as much push as I was hoping to see, which was definitely disappointing, where, they would get the double down, but then you would see that somebody would still slip through as somebody climbed to the second level. And this is the second week in a row the Patriots have struggled to get to the second level in block linebackers, where especially in some of these more aggressive schemes, when you have these athletic linebackers that want to fly downhill, with the bigger, Mike and Wenu types, Leighton Robinson types, it can be harder for them to peel off and get to those guys. Actually, Robinson does a pretty solid job. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but Michael Jordan, like I said, did have an issue with that. So the biggest issue that I have seen in the past 2 weeks has been Michael Jordan. So you have to wonder, like, this team is trying to find a consistent offensive line. Maybe they stick with Michael Jordan because he hasn't really been a liability in pass protection for the most part. But in the run game, this is the second week in a row where a lot of the negativity or the negatives come from him not really able to do his job on a consistent basis. So I'm curious if they're going to switch things up, because honestly, if Leighton Robinson is healthy, and obviously we don't know if he is for sure because he suffered, it was an ankle injury, right? That was what it was.
Yeah, it ended up being an ankle. Yeah.
Him and Caden Wallace, man, just terrible luck. But I do like, especially because Leighton was pretty solid early on. There was one time where he tried to pancake a guy, and he actually wound up kind of throwing him almost into Drake May. It was on one of Drake May's first scrambles. Still a work in progress. He's a rookie. But I like the right side a lot. I do think that Leighton and Nwenu are a good duo. On the left side, though, still very much a work in progress, because at least Vidarian Lowe and Michael Jordan are okay when they're together because they have that chemistry, and especially on outside zone, when they've been together and the team runs left, they're usually pretty solid, although Lowe's gotten a couple of holding penalties. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's really Michael Jordan. Ben Brown maybe don't get pushed back quite as often on outside zone runs. I still don't think that's a glaring issue for them. And then if City So is in the lineup next week, I'd like to see more consistency from him.
So let me ask you this then, because, I mean, we mentioned a ton of Michael Jordan, and we have the numbers here. His 26.6 PFF run blocking grade is the lowest in the NFL since week 6. So obviously not great there. You mentioned some of Onwenu there, and then obviously Layden Robinson and Ben Brown could get better. But the other thing that you didn't really touch on that I had mentioned it before, but I don't know how much it really mattered, is Ramondre Stevenson. Like this dip over the last 2 weeks, where their yards per carry goes down. It's been the last 2 weeks, and Ramondre didn't play last week against Houston, and he played this week, but clearly I would think wasn't 100% after just one practice. So did you notice anything from Stevenson that, it's blocked up, but he's not getting to the next level, or he's not able to find his gap because he's just slower off the punch or kind of still nursing back from something? Or do you think it's strictly the offensive line?
I mean, I definitely didn't think he was as explosive.
Okay.
Like there were times where I was like, yeah, it looks like he doesn't have quite that same forcefulness as he usually does, but you can see it in the compilation. There's a lot of times where he's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, and Ramondre and Antonio Gibson have done a pretty good job for the most part, still making positive yardage out of that. But it reminds me of last year where we were saying, and Ramondre admitted that he did get off to a slow start, but I'm looking at these plays and I'm like, he's getting hit at the line of scrimmage or behind it on a pretty regular basis. And then when he got better, it was because City So entered the lineup, and then you had more consistency at guard. Every time they ran right, pretty much they had some level of success, or at least more consistently than they did on other plays or before City So entered the lineup. So definitely don't think that Ramondre was 100%, and we can put some of that, but at the same time, you're seeing it play after play after play. They're not really getting big avenues to run through. And it's one thing, obviously, you have Ramondre and you have Antonio who can make a lot of their own yards, but you don't want the Nats to live in that world. And that's one thing I have down here with the yards before carry. You mentioned they have the fewest yards before carry. They're the only team that has negative yards. That really tells a story for me where, yes, of course, like Stevenson's not playing his best, but the offensive line has to give these guys some more help.
100%. Yeah, you meant only team averaging negative yards before contact over the last 2 weeks. That is clearly not good enough. And even if healthy Ramondre Stevenson has 3 defenders in his face, it's not going to be good enough, and he's not going to be able to make explosive runs or really even reach that second level through the line if he has defenders in his face. So that's the run game, Taylor. We're going to move on to the Patriots stopping the run, or the fact that they're not stopping the run. But before we do, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks, because Prize Picks right now, it's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So make sure you run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Right now, they have a free Anthony Edwards square, so it's the NBA coming up soon. Celtics start tomorrow. Not exactly sure, Taylor, when. I believe it's actually the Minnesota Timberwolves play tomorrow as well, and you can put Anthony Edwards more than half a point rather in your lineup, and it's a free square for your lineup. So if you haven't already, hop on Prize Picks, add that Anthony Edwards square to your lineup, and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So again, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We will also have 2 Monday Night Football lineups coming out on all Patriots CLNS social media, as well as my own Twitter account at Mike Kadlick. So make sure you keep it locked in there. You'll get my picks. And again, you got to use code CLNS on Prize Picks. Help us out. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Taylor, let's get into, and I just realized as we were sort of doing our podcast and our rundown that the reason that you were messed up was because our rundown had the run defense and the run offense flip. So it's not, Taylor's not completely in space.
Oh, it's Mike's fault.
It's Mike's fault. I wrote, sneak preview, we have an article coming out on clnsmedia.com, a dual article with all of the film, all of the quotes, everything kind of put into one, and I wrote it that way. And so that's what I was reading. Taylor was reading opposite. Honest mistake. We're a soft podcast, but we're playing soft, Taylor. We're not We're not soft. We're playing soft, and we're going to improve it there. So let's go.
I'm trying to plug the pod just now, and I said why they struggle versus the Texans. I think my brain. I'm dying. My brain is dying because of this goddamn team.
We're 1-6, just like the Patriots are. But let's get into the Patriots not stopping the run, and this is the fascinating part to me, Taylor, because there's really. There's a little bit of drama here because they had their issues stopping the run, obviously. Tank Bigsby and company rushed for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns on their 39 carries. And right now they're tied for a season worst, it was their season worst with 6 explosive runs against the Jaguars. They've now allowed 22 such runs since week 3. That's tied for second in the NFL. And big old Bill Belichick weighed in on the Patriots stopping the run and how Jerod Mayo called that defense soft. And he said, defensively, the Patriots led the league last year in rushing defense. Yards per carry, number
actually
1
not
in the
true
league.
Because that last Jets game, he's actually wrong. I don't think they did. I think that kind of screwed him,
but he goes on to say, this is with the Pat McAfee show, if you haven't already heard it. Yards per carry, number 1 in the league. And this year, they're way down in the 20s. And it's the same guys. They re-signed Jennings. They re-signed Devy. They re-signed Duggar. Marcus Jones and Gonzalez have been healthy. You got Wise. You got Godshaw. He's really dropping names here, Taylor. You got Keon White and Mapu. It's all the same players. Belichick goes on to say, I'm hurt for those guys. To call them soft, they're not soft. They were the best team in the league last year against the run. I feel bad for the defensive players on that one because that's a tough group. Sounds like the former man in charge putting it on the coaching, while Jerod Mayo putting it on the execution because he says they have to play better. It's technique. It's not the X's and O's. We have to be where we're supposed to be. So, Taylor, what went wrong in the run defense on Sunday against Jacksonville?
Before I even get into that, first of all, I don't think Bill has watched the Patriots this year because half the players he named aren't playing very well this year relative to what their standard is. And while I understand a lot of that's due to coaching, like the fact that he's kind of ignoring the fact that Barmore's not playing and Bentley's not playing.
That was the big one. Barmore not being in the middle and Peppers as well. Like, come on, man.
It's like Judon, sure, that's a wash. I understand. But like Christian Gonzalez isn't having a huge impact in your run defense. Christian Gonzalez is playing well. Marcus Jones is playing well, for the most part, because the run or the pass coverage is playing pretty well, especially in the actual secondary. The run defense, though, like Jerod Mayo kind of hit on it, but it almost feels like whack-a-mole sometimes because other weeks it's been, Raekwon McMillan and Keon White, and we talked about that.
Right.
This week, the guy who's been your best run defender, Devon Godshaw, who led the NFL entering week 7 with 18 run stops, was one of your worst players on defense, unfortunately. And, I'll pull it up, but I think it was really disappointing, the performance that we got from this run defense, especially from some of the guys that you really do rely on. Now, it was a mixed bag, I'll say that. Like Devon Godshaw, 37 PFF run blocking grade in week 7. That was his lowest in a game since week 6 of 2021 against the Cowboys, his first year with the Patriots. Average depth of tackle in that game, or against the Jaguars, 4.7 yards, the third furthest in a game for him since joining New England. So for perspective, 4.5 yards, that means the running back has gotten more yards than you want to average per carry most of the time that he ended up tackling, and that just wasn't acceptable. Now, on one end, he was getting doubled consistently, and you can see that here. There's not a whole lot of times where Godshaw is losing one-on-one, but still, he needs to be better in those situations. He's a nose tackle. His entire job is to take on those double teams, and I understand they've been moving him more to defensive end, the way you're going to see in some of these clips with some of the more depth guys like Jaquelin Roy and Eric Johnson, with them at the nose, right? But in one of the things he said was no tackle should be able to block me one-on-one. Really, the Jaguars did a much better job in those situations of getting multiple bodies on him. But there's also a rep where, like, Godshaw got blocked by a tight end, and I was like, okay, whoa. This isn't like against the Dolphins where it was that one drive where he really kind of got rocked because they were on the field for so long and they were tired, and everyone kind of acknowledged attrition set in. That's one thing. But schematically, what really bothered me was the fact that they were getting gashed by the same run mostly in the second quarter, but really throughout the game. And the biggest issue that they had were these inside zone runs from the shotgun where they would have an RPO with Evan Ingram. There was an option to throw the bubble to him. I think they only did it like one time. The bubble option basically took Christian Ellis out of the play almost every single time because he had to respect that. He took one or two steps outside, and then he couldn't get to the play the majority of those reps. that typically left Jelani Tavai as the middle linebacker at the point of attack. Now, one, the fact that it was the inside zone run and Tank Bigsby and who is the other back? He used to be Dearness Johnson. They did a really good job kind of forcing him to respect a run to the opposite gap and then shooting to his side, and that slowed him down. But the fact that they kept seeing this run, and you're seeing consistently Devon Godshaw getting blown out of his gap by double teams, Dietrich Wise really not even competitive, was really upsetting to me. And they tried different things. Like you see it in the compilation. The first time it happened, they were in nickel. They were in a 3-3 alignment with 5 guys on the line of scrimmage and 1 linebacker. Against RPOs, you really don't want one guy off the ball because it makes it harder for you to split between the run and the pass on those RPOs. What they did was they tried more looks where they still had essentially 5-man fronts, but then 2 backers off the line of scrimmage where they would have Jelani Tavai play side and then Christian Ellis to the backside. Sometimes they would have 5 defensive linemen on the line of scrimmage where it's like Keon White and Anthony Jennings on the edge. Sometimes it was a tight front where instead of an outside linebacker on both edges, on one of those edges to the bubble screen side, they had Kyle Duggar. So he can still respect the threat of the bubble while you have the integrity of having 2 inside linebackers to defend the run. It still didn't work. They still got gashed by it. Now, there were also runs where like inside zone from under center where you would see, again, Jelani Tavai kind of take a step one direction thinking the run was going to hit there, and then he's late getting to the point of attack. And it was a mixed bag again. I want to give guys credit who did play well because Daniel Ekuale tied a single-game career high with 4 run tackles against the Jaguars. Only other time he did that was 2020 when he was actually on the Jaguars, funny enough. And also his PFF run blocking grade of 70.4 was his second highest for a game in his career, for a game where he had 10 snaps against the run. And Anthony Jennings, the dude brings his hard hat every single week. I genuinely can't remember the last time I saw an Anthony Jennings game and was like, he was bad. Like, really, he's almost always good. Sometimes they'll just get the edge on him, but really he's very consistent.
Belichick knows Jennings is good too. That was the first guy he mentioned today when talking about the players that are still there.
I mean, Belichick knows ball. He may be a little salty, and he's, kind of shitting on Mayo more than he needs to, but he knows ball. Anthony Jennings, career high 6 run tackles in week 7. He also had 4 run stops, which led the Patriots and was the second most he had for a game in his career. The most was 5 in week 17 in 2023 against the Bills. So that's, again, the frustrating thing is it's not a complete wash. Like, you do have guys who are doing their jobs. Jaquelin Roy and Christian Ellis, for the most part, weren't bad, considering those are guys being asked to step into bigger roles because other guys either can't fill them sufficiently or they're injured. Jaquelin Roy did get moved by double teams, but at the same time, you're seeing him sometimes take on those doubles and get off his blocks late. He's pretty consistently winning against one-on-one blocks. Christian Ellis was more competitive against linebackers at the second level than what we saw from Raekwon McMillan, which is why we mentioned I want to see more Christian Ellis at the second level because Raekwon McMillan has not been getting it done. Most of the explosive runs have come with him at the point of attack. Even Keon White and Dietrich Wise, we were saying that we'd like to see less of them because they're not getting a ton of pass rush from those guys even, and you're giving up runs. So at some point, you got to say, like, what do we care more about? This game, you'll see it on some of these plays. Not this one, but they did actually use Daniel Ekuale instead of Dietrich Wise and Keon White to make sure they were a little beefier and sturdier up front, and it still didn't work. So in terms of options down the road, at the end of the day, guys need to play better. You cannot have Devon Godshaw being your worst run defender. That's completely unacceptable. I think the guys like Jaquelin Roy can be more consistent. Eric Johnson had some rough reps, but then later in the game, he seemed like he was kind of figuring it out. But at the end of the day, run defense is about team football. They don't have Christian Barmore and Juwan Bentley and Jabril Peppers to make up for guys around them kind of failing. So each of these guys needs to do their job. They cannot be getting blown off the line of scrimmage. Unfortunately, that's what we saw a lot from Godshaw, from Dietrich Wise, and then Jelani Tavai not really being as much of a force at the point of attack as you'd like. So it's kind of annoying talking about how run defense can be better when it's not really a schematic thing. It really is just like, no, guys are getting blown off the ball. That's it. Play better. I'm sorry. That's in terms of substitutions, I don't really know what else you can do. The guys you had out there are the guys that we've been talking about as players who maybe are going to get more snaps. So it's got to be an execution thing unless you plan on bringing in, different players from either via trade who are young and can be a long-term addition for you, or maybe there's someone in free agency they like. I'm sure that anybody in free agency isn't going to be able to fill the void the way they want to. So, bottom line, got to play better.
So reading, not so much reading between the lines, but taking your take on it, you agree with Mayo that it isn't the X's and O's and that they're putting them schematically in the right positions. It is on the players to, as Bill Belichick would say, do their job, and they're not doing it right now. So you're blending both sides of the regime this one. And I think I agree. I haven't dove into it as much as you have. But, I mean, the fact that this defense has played well in the past, they've played well in this type of scheme last year and at the beginning of this year. They held up early, and they've just gotten gashed the last couple of weeks. It really feels like what the players are saying is true, where we need all guys on the same page doing our job and not playing for, themselves, but playing for the team. And they just haven't done it right now. And that's kind of where they're at.
There was a play that I didn't even show because it wasn't the run defense. One of the most glaring examples of guys, I know kind of freelancing, like Dietrich Wise. I wouldn't even call it freelancing, but on the Trevor Lawrence scramble in the third quarter where he completely loses track of the quarterback, and instead of like extending and trying to look outside of his blocker's frame, he disengages and drifts upfield, and then Trevor Lawrence runs, and you see Daniel Ekuale after the play just like, what are we doing here? And that's why I asked Mayo, and I mentioned this in another video, but when your leaders, your captains, your guys who have just been re-signed and extended are the ones making these mistakes, is that more discouraging? What do you do? And he kind of gave a pretty boilerplate answer, which I'm sure he still believes that, it's upsetting regardless of who it is, and those guys need to play better, but that's where it's like, is it coaching? Like, I don't know. It's got to be coaching, because how do you fix that? Like, I understand partially what Bill Belichick is saying with the run defense, and that it's the same guys pretty much. There are some of these people who are still on the field. So what is different? I'd like to know as well why, Jelani Tavai isn't necessarily playing as well, despite mostly being in the same kind of role. Sure. And obviously the supporting cast isn't there around them, like we mentioned, but, it's discouraging when you see these guys who you thought you could rely on coming into this season being some of the main people who are the reason you struggle. Like, it's not just Jaquelin Roy. It's not just, even Joshua Uche, who's been seeing less snaps on rundowns.
Or like, Raekwon McMillan having to be in there because Jawan Bentley's hurt.
And it's not like Christian Ellis is the one blowing these runs. It's Godshaw. It's Wise. It's Jelani Tavai. Like, these are your staples on defense. So, I wish I had the answer, y'all. I really do, other than play better. But, I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's just poor execution in the run defense.
I feel you. I'm going to go to D in the chat. Thank you. We appreciate the tip. And also, D says Drake May needs to start keeping the ball on zone reads. Well, we're not touching on Drake May today. We're going to do a Drake May film review tomorrow at noon, live on Press Pass. So keep it here. Check it out. And D, if you want to see more Drake May, maybe leave a tip in the Drake May video as well. But we appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're going to get to the last thing Jerod Mayo talked about with this Patriots soft football team, and that is their kick coverage. But before we get into that, a word from our friends at Game Time, because right now on the Game Time app, you can get into Patriots versus Jets next Sunday at Gillette Stadium for as little as $97 on the Game Time app. They also have the Game Time Picks feature right on the top of the screen that filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. They have super deals. They have great deals. They have amazing deals. And I'm not just saying that. It literally says that right on the app. You also see your seat view, which not a lot of ticketing apps do, but the Game Time app does. So you click it, you click your seat, and you can see exactly what the field is going to look like in front of you at the game. So make sure, if you're going to try and go to this game next Sunday, do it through the Game Time app and use our code CLNS to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Taylor?
Game time.
It's game time, and it's also time to wrap up this podcast with the last section of what Jerod Mayo talked about and what Bill Belichick talks about, what making tough football teams is all about. It's running the ball, it's defending the run, and it's kick coverage. And I talked about how Mayo and Belichick did not agree on what made the Patriots' poor play happen on the run defense, but they do agree on the kick coverage. Jerod Mayo mentioned on WEEI today that while Bryce Behringer has been a weapon the entire year, quote, one thing I would say is if you punt the ball right down the middle of the field, it puts a lot of stress on everyone else, and that's what happened. Bill Belichick said the same thing today on the Pat McAfee show. There's what he said. He said, I don't understand why punters just want to punt the ball straight down the middle of the field against good returners. Okay, it comes back 97 yards. But it's hard when you lay it right down the middle, like right down the middle of the field. You've got to cover all 53 1/3 yards. You outkick the coverage. He went on to say, I get it. Behringer might lead the league in average. He's got an 80-yarder, a 77-something yarder, but they're so hard to cover. And look, if you're going to go right down the middle, put some hang time on the ball. He screamed this, Taylor. He goes, put some hang time on the ball. Like, get it up there. Those 4-second 69-yarders are hard to cover. As you can see here, excuse me, the coverage lanes, not great. They got out leveraged the entire time. But Taylor, what's your take on what happened on this kick return? Which, again, the Patriots were up 10-0. They let up a quick 14. Then they punt the ball. And then they obviously let up this touchdown for a 22-point second quarter for Jacksonville.
Yeah, we've had 2 Patriots head coaches tell us that the reasons they thought it happened. So there's not a whole lot more for me to dive into all of it, honestly. And I'm not really a special teams coach. There's only so much I can glean kind of just based on what I know about football fundamentals. So my biggest observations for this were, one, you see that Marcellus Dial and Joe Cardona end up basically in the exact same space. And then by the time they actually get downfield, they end up getting split, and that turns into the seam that Parker Washington ends up using to get upfield. And then it also looked like Christian Ellis and Jelani Tavai ended up too far upfield themselves, where by the time they tried to get back down, they couldn't catch up to the returner. So again, I would like to hear what Springer has to say about this, because again, I just don't. Most of these plays, I only feel a certain level of comfort to actually say what I think happened, because there's so much we don't know. But again, from this play, like I know somebody said Joshua Bledsoe took a bad angle. I don't really see that as a Joshua Bledsoe problem on that play, because if the returner had gone his way, I think. Oh my gosh,
Del Pettis. I did the same 24. Thing. Del Pettis, but I got you. Same deal.
Case of the Mondays. Jeez, freaking Louise. I like Del Pettis too. I'm Del Pettis high. That's crazy. But yeah, I don't really see Del Pettis' angle as a problem here. I really think he just has a huge opening to the left side, and no one's really there to catch him. So yeah, again, Marcellus Dial and Joe Cardona ending up in the same area, and Dial was the gunner, so I'm guessing he was probably the one at fault. Also, Cardona is Mr. Coach on the field, so that had something to do with it, I'm sure. And then we'll see it again here, because this is the one where you actually highlight the names. You can see Dial and Cardona, same place. They end up split. That's a seam. Ellis is far upfield. Tavai can't really get there, and there's no chance that he's going to catch him after that. So, I mean, the fundamentals have already been set. We've known it since Bill Belichick was the head coach, and that's why I tweeted that. It's being tough means that you can run the ball, or defend the run, and cover kicks. To be fair, the Patriots ran the ball decently, but were inconsistent last year. I think that's pretty fair to say. And then when it comes to stopping the run, they were elite, but covering kicks, they weren't very good either. So I know, speaking against Bill Belichick is a very fine line, and I'm not one who likes to walk it very often. But let's not pretend like the Patriots were this paragon of discipline and toughness last year. They were tough in one area. And then pretty much everywhere else, they were 100%. Incompetent to a degree. Not incompetent, that's disrespectful, but the coverage was still as good as I think it could have been given who they had out there. But these issues aren't all brand new. It's just more discouraging. And it's the run defense is the one thing they did very well last year. And now they actually are not even not great. They suck recently. Right. So, I get what Belichick was saying and all that. And Mayo needs to do better. And we've talked about that in our other pod, where a lot of that probably it comes down to being more active and being more of a voice, because you are someone who has led the Patriots defense for years in multiple roles. Now that you lead the organization, especially defensively, it's probably not great for you to take a step back and be Mr. CEO when you were in business for a couple of years, 2-3 years. You've been in football for a lot longer. Play to your strengths, be a linebacker for the team, and get this damn run defense under control. The run offense, I feel like that's partially a personnel thing. Sure. I hope that's something that gets figured out as they get more consistency as, time goes on. Maybe they work out the lineup. But the run defense, bottom line, needs to be better. There's no excuses. And the kicking game, obviously, you can't be letting, those kind of returns happen. That's the second week in a row where Bryce Behringer's had a moment that I'm sure he'd want back.
100%. I'm with you. And I see in the chat now, too, someone saying Bill flexing his 4-win season last year. And I get where Bill is coming from, because he feels like he got pushed out of here and exiled, and they had Mayo lined up. I get why now that they're 1-6, the pettiness is going to come out. That's natural. That's human nature. And the fact that he has a platform to do so with McAfee, with probably on the Manning cast tonight, and he does the CW, he's going to do that, and all the power to him. He has a right to for winning 6 championships. But at the end of the day, they gave Bill the chance to rebuild this thing. He went 29-38 or whatever the numbers are over the last 4 years. And as bad as they are right now, they also weren't good here over the last several seasons in different areas. So like I do and play the fence, I can see both sides of it, where on one hand, he has a right and has a leg to stand on because he got, I said it already, exiled out of here, but also you guys weren't great in a lot of phases here over the last couple of years. And that's why you're not the head coach of the Patriots anymore. But we're not going to do the Belichick thing
It's
here.
not an anti-Bill pod. Like,
exactly. This is the film
he
room.
Put it out there. We got to acknowledge it.
He put it out there, and those are the three things that Belichick has talked about: the running the football, the stopping the run, and kick coverage. And so it all ties in, and that's why we're mentioning it. But that's kind of where we're at. That's why the Patriots were called soft, was because of these three areas, and that's why we broke down those three things today. Yak Taylor, go ahead.
One other thing, Drake May on WEEI on the culture under Mayo. Brian actually tweeted out a quote, so I'll just read it real quick.
Yeah.
Coach Mayo always preaches hard work works. We know that's one of their phrases. Working hard and dropping your ego at the door. I think we're learning that. There's been some times where guys are having to figure that out. We got a really young team, so guys are starting to figure that out and buy into the process. He also said Mayo's starting to challenge us. What is the identity of this football team? What do we want to be this year as the season goes on? He said today in the meeting, we're a 1-6 football team. We are what we put out there. Mm-hmm. Also went on to say, so I think we got some guys who are going to make some shifts in the way they approach things and hopefully get back on track. We have heard that sentiment. Daniel Aquale's talked about the egos. Kendrick Bourne spoke out about guys maybe not having the right approach, like not getting enough sleep, not eating the right ways. And Kendrick Bourne can say that because we know Kendrick Bourne, dude posts workout stories all the time. He's clearly putting in the work and trying to be the best version of himself. And, Gotcha, even though he had a poor performance on Sunday, has also been very vocal about this team needing to be better, Jelani to buy all those guys. So the quote sounds good. It's fair that they acknowledge it is a very young team. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you got to rely on your veterans and you got to figure it out, or else you're going to continue on the early Dan Campbell track where you're just going to keep losing games. And in this city,
the tide's not going to turn. Yeah.
And there's not as much patience here for losing as there is in Detroit. So,
No, for sure. But speaking of Drake May, speaking of that quote, we're going to be back tomorrow here on Patriots Press Pass with another film room with the more optimistic side, which we love to do here on Patriots Daily. And that's Drake May. And it's the fact that the Patriots and you folks in New England might have a quarterback in him. So we're going to break down his game from London tomorrow, 12 p.m. here on the channel. So make sure you keep it locked in. Rate, review, and subscribe to Patriots Press Pass. Like the videos. Follow us on Twitter at TKyles39 and at Mike Kadlick for around the clock, 24-hour coverage of these 1-6 New England Patriots. So until tomorrow, Taylor, thanks for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace out, everybody.